Kevork, the power of social media. I'm so glad that I was able to connect with you, and I appreciate this opportunity for you coming on my show to talk to me on what's going on in Syria. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm sure that your audience is also looking forward to know more about what's happening in Syria, especially in the current climate, when we have lots of mainstream press, but they're not doing their job basically, again, like they usually do, and this time in Syria.
What has life like been for you personally since all this started? Your phone blowing up, people want to talk to you, everything. What's it like?
Actually, I started my podcast in 2017, early 2017. I had this motivation to tell the Western audiences about what's going on in Syria. And I never claimed to be objective. I always said I'm subjective. But I also told them that I would never lie to you. I would never lie on my podcast or try to manipulate you, but I'm here to tell you the other side of the story. And every story has two sides or multiple sides. And I believe that the mainstream press has been very, I would say, misleading about what's happening in Syria because they were one-sided and they were trying to make things sensational because they try to play with the emotions of the people to shift public opinion to a certain direction. And I know the moment when the press starts sensationalizing an issue, there is something deeper behind it. So I start to dig in. And I was like, I would say in 2017, I was 27 years old or 28 years old, I'm not sure, but I was quite younger, and I started more in a different way, let's say, my podcast or my YouTube channel, like it was a solo speaking, mostly short videos, and then I developed it. But the main reason why I started Syrian analysis was to cover Syria, and that's how I gained, let's say, the following, the initial following. And then Syrian file has been put on the shelf. So I also myself thought like it's over, like everybody is speaking about other issues happening, things happening in Ukraine, Taiwan, in Nagorno-Karabakh, and also in different parts of the world. So I expanded my horizon, and I'm a kind of a person who I like to learn about the country and some recent history. That's why I digged in more, like for Ukraine, to understand the importance of Ukraine and why basically NATO and the United States are fighting over Ukraine. So I expanded it, but later, now, let's say in 2024, the last part of this year, the conflict escalated in Syria, and we have seen a regime change war. So people who used to follow my work for Syria, you see that many people started coming back because they want to know the other side of the story. Why is this happening? Who are the powers trying to conquer Damascus? And who is Jolani and who was Assad? So even I would say from the mainstream press, many journalists followed me and they started sending me invites. And I'm going to be very honest with you, I didn't answer to any of the mainstream media journalists, none, zero. And I received many emails, people want a statement, and I don't, because I already have, I would say, 14 years of experience, and I think 14 years of experience is enough to understand that these mainstream outlets are either corrupted to the core institutionally, or the person, the journalist who works for this outlet, this person is, it doesn't have the best interests of my people in his or her heart. So giving someone a statement and then cherry picking your statement and bringing 5 other people to counter your argument, that's not fair. So I give long format talk with people like yourself, because I can express my opinion freely, and people, when they listen to you in a longer format, they understand the context, the history, and the message you're trying to send. Otherwise, like, they invite you for a show and you have 30 minutes and then you have 4 guests, 3 of them on the opposite side, and they give you 30 seconds to answer a question, and then they start interrupting you or provoking you. So that doesn't make sense for me. I'm not that kind of a guy. I like to have legit and civilized conversation with people, even if I disagree with this person. So I really find this type of format is really comfortable also for the people. People, when they watch and they see and they listen, people are intelligent and they can detect the power behind the words you are saying, and they can feel if you're truthful or not. So these last 2 weeks, I received I was doing like 4 or 5 podcasts per day, and speaking 4 or 5 hours per day about political issues is not easy. Like, we're not speaking about the skies and the weather. It's like you have to be consistent, you have to be convincing, and you shouldn't lose track, and you shouldn't lose focus. Otherwise, the people say this guy is just doing word salad, right? So it's really, people maybe do not know it because they're watching it, but it takes lots of effort, mental resilience to do 4 or 5 podcasts per day and still garnering or attracting people to watch the podcast,
Yeah, I don't know how you can have a conversation in 30 minutes or under. Because when you start to get that rhythm and get into things, the 30 minutes is over. I mean, I strongly, try to deter or discourage 30, at least a minimum of 40 an hour. I mean, God, the last couple of days I've done, one was 2.5 and the other one was almost 3 hours. There's just so much to talk about right now, but I don't know how you do that in under 30 minutes.
That's very difficult. Actually, when I start my live stream, I do daily live streamings, but in these last 2 weeks, my schedule was messed up because of the many podcast interviews that I preferred to go to other platforms and expand the reach to deliver the message to the wider audience. But when I click on, let's say, live, and I go live on YouTube and Rumble 5 times per week, 1 hour myself is nothing. Like, I can speak 1 hour and explain about only one thing for 1 hour. So I totally agree. Like, 30 minutes is the minimum. What can you speak of in 30 minutes when you're especially addressing a geopolitical conflict? Are you going to start with the historical background? Are you going to put it in the proper context? Which lens are you going to wear in order to see this conflict? Because nowadays, and this is something that I see is repeated consistently when we watch the talking heads on TV, the mainstream, and you realize that there is a particular lens they wear or they put when they want to address certain topics, and there are other lenses they put to speak about other conflicts. Like when they speak about the Middle East, for example, it's consistent among most mainstream journalists, pundits, that they have to put this liberal democratic lens to explain everything, and also the Orientalist lens, basically, to explain everything that is going on in the region. And I know for sure that they are not truthful with this lens, because they don't care about democracy or human rights in our region. They care about our natural resources, they care about our geopolitical importance, and they believe and they care about the security, or let's say the national security of the US, Israel, and most importantly, they want to guarantee the supremacy of these imperial powers in the region. So trying to sell me the narrative that we have to do regime change in Syria because Clarissa Ward or Hala Gorani or some other mainstream journalist on CNN or MSNBC telling me, oh no, we are going to free you from the tyrant. I mean, I've seen this movie before. I've seen this in Iraq, and I've seen it in Libya. And I think if these journalists were consistent with their approach, they should start in probably Qatar. They should probably start in Saudi Arabia or Bahrain or Kuwait or Jordan. But you notice every pro-American country in the region, they don't receive the similar treatment by this mainstream press, and they don't wear the same lens. And in the contrary, they receive funding from these Gulf countries. Like, there is a famous institute, which is a think tank, Middle East Institute. They received funds from foreign embassies, including many of the Arab Gulf monarchies. So you're basically receiving funding from monarchies that are not democratic at all, and you are publishing research after research and submitting it to the US State Department, trying to convince them that they have to do regime change in Syria because they have to bring democracy to this country. So I'm not fool enough to believe that these countries and these fundings are basically serving the interests of the Syrian people. I would be the first one who would benefit from a democratic system in Syria, right? Like I'm a journalist, then I will benefit from free press, and I had political aspirations in the country. I could also benefit from political freedoms, but I don't want to bring these so-called or alleged freedoms over a tank of American tank or a British tank or an Israeli tank or by Al-Qaeda tank, because this is what happened basically in Syria. Al-Qaeda factions have won this war, and they're the ones going to form the government. And they're the ones that this same press that they used to call them terrorists in the past, now they're polishing their reputation, rebranding them and presenting them as some sort of democratic forces in the country. That's crazy.
Well, and for people in the United States that, are saying, well, democracy to Syria, free the people. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure out what they've done here, the deterioration that we're experiencing, both on, the federal, the state, and local. Any major city, you can just see the decline from, 5 years ago to now. Don't tell me that they care about freedom and democracy and protecting. I'm not that smart of a guy, Kevork. People get mad at me when I say that, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that they don't care about freedom and safety.
No, actually, freedom. What is the definition of freedom? Like, if you want to have complete freedom to express your opinion, I'm a freedom I'm an advocate for free speech, and I'm a free speech absolutist, which means I would like to hear a very controversial opinions which can really provoke my thought. And there were so many cases that I was so afraid to listen to an opinion, and then I realized that this thought-provoking opinion actually expanded my horizon. And some of these, unfortunately, going to be really bad opinions. Like, there are seriously bad opinions, but that's the definition of freedom. But nowadays we live in I would say, things are changing rapidly, especially after the Corona era. And you see that the politicians who are in government nowadays, they are the ones calling for suppression of opinions. And so you're free to say, but there are consequences. So what happens is basically you're going to probably lose your job. And if you speak about Palestine, like you would be called an anti-Semite. And you know how difficult it is for someone to be called an anti-Semite if you criticize a crime of a government which is led by people basically committing crimes. It's like you're not going after the religion or the ethnicity or the national or the nation itself, but you're going after people who commit crimes. And every nation have criminals. I don't understand why it is difficult to criticize Israeli officials nowadays. Like where I sit in Germany, you could lose your job, you could be sent into an economic prison. And the same thing happened during the Corona era. People lost their jobs. And now in Syria, they call them HTS. I can assure you, if one member of HTS infiltrates the American borders and they detect him, and this guy is carrying an arm, you will see helicopters and tanks against him. It's not a joke to have tens of thousands of these HTS terrorists carrying medium to like light and medium arms, basically, walking in the streets with in pickup trucks, having PKCs and AK-47s and RPGs and anti-tank rockets, and they're fighting against the government. You don't have to like the government to say armed insurgency. When there is an armed insurgency, the government will crush it or will try to crush it. It's like no government tolerates that. But what is tolerable in our countries, it's not tolerable in other countries. So in Syria, if you carry arm against the government and you have a tank and you're killing basically people, regardless of their political affiliation, you're a freedom fighter. But if you do it in the United States, you're a terrorist. But this guy who now conquers Syria, there is a $10 million bounty on his head, and he was in Iraq, and he participated in sectarian war in Iraq, and he was part of the Al-Qaeda, and he came to Syria, and he formed the offshoot of Al-Qaeda in Syria. He was part of ISIS. He was the partner of Baghdadi. But then you have an entire PR department polishing these guys and rebranding him. And now the CNN sits with this guy, and they present him a diversity-friendly guy, and he's all of a sudden minority-loving and Christian-loving, and like it's ridiculous and absurd to think that this guy has changed. And when he was asked, because if the CNN meets with Putin, let's say, they would go really bulldogging against him, right? Like they want to trap him. They want to ask him questions that he would fall in his answers. They would interrupt him. But that's not the case when they sit with international designated terrorists like Jolani, and the CNN journalist gives him the pushy time, basically. She rolls beds of roses in front of him and asks him ridiculous questions. And he says, like, yeah, this was a phase, like decapitating people, basically detonating cars or car bombs or like your suicide attacks. Those were just a phase in his life. I mean, I don't think that any sane person could pass through a phase when they would send suicide bombers somewhere or decapitate people. That's not a phase. No normal person could do that. Like, it's not like an emo phase somebody passes through, or a rock phase, somebody all of a sudden likes rock music in his childhood and then changes to some R&B or hip hop. We had all these music phases no, that's not the same thing. Like, but they're portraying him like he was he was like, maybe was radicalized, and now I shaved my beard, I become civilized. No, that's not how things work. And because I see things in a different way, and I think that all these well-known terrorists that we have been told that they were boogeymen, they were all a product of foreign intelligence. Starting from Osama bin Laden to Baghdadi to Jolani, these are all intelligence assets. And the former special envoy of the US to Syria, his name is James Jeffrey, he says Jolani's army has been an asset for the US strategy in Syria, and Jolani led the Al-Qaeda offshoot in Syria. The US officials say that. Jake Sullivan, he sent an email to Hillary Clinton in 2012, in February 2012, I believe this was on the 12th of February 2012, and he said, Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria, and this is leaked by WikiLeaks. So we know that they use such groups to achieve their geopolitical goals. And then when the time comes for rebranding, because this guy is the most powerful guy now, he overthrew the government. And the people who think that Jolani will build a democratic state, I have a new brand new vaccine basically to sell them, and this is definitely going to help them and immunize them against the probably idiocy. I have no words to say, seriously.
Do you think that so I had Matt Bracken on. I've had him on a couple times this week, but he's a ex-Navy SEAL, and he said that in this case with Jolani, do you think he had the approach this time around to be more take a little more of a political we're not going to behead people on camera, we're not going to you're not going to see the brutality as we march through, in order to humanize him and create this sort of psyop?
My theory is just based on the previous patterns. What's going to happen is, basically, now, since they occupy everything, they're not going to decapitate every single person. They're going to try to, like, use, like, the most, like, brutal, like, violent, like, force, like, violence, 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 like, force, like, everyone who opposes them. They're incapable of doing it, especially that now all the international press is also present in the country. But when everybody forgets about Syria, and Syria becomes like a secondary or third level in its importance, and there is going to be another conflict probably soon somewhere else, and everybody is focused somewhere else, what Jolani's people are going to do, basically, they are going to have a strong grip over the government, and especially on the education. So they are going to have changed the curriculum completely from a secular science-based education to Islamic-based education, basically. Secondly, they are going to control the Ministry of Culture, which means every drama, because Syria is known for its drama work, and they have very famous series, like they publish yearly or they work on new series every year, and all the Arab world watch basically these Syrian series. So they're going to control the, as I mentioned, the education and then the Ministry of Culture, and they will Islamize it. I'm not against like religion itself, but Syria is a multicultural and multi-faith country, and you cannot really bring one belief into and impose it on the rest of the people. And then they're going to also have an upper hand over the military. So you control indoctrination, you control what the people watch and see, and you have the Jacobian force in your hands, which is the military. So you already control the society completely. In anything else that comes after that, like elections, those are all going to be cosmetic. This is going to be for the media purposes to show that there are elections happening in the country, but everyone is under their control. And the media will come and endorse this, and they will say they are fair and good and genuine elections in Syria, because this is their guy. But I believe that Jolani will become a burden on the US. And once they see him becoming too controversial in Syria, they will kill him. Like they do with bin Laden and Baghdadi, and they throw their bodies in the ocean, and they say, oops, he's gone. We don't know where he's any longer. And this is the same thing going to happen with Jolani. Jolani is a dead man walking. And whether it's Jolani or anyone else, the US, Israel, and the rest, they have already achieved their goal. The main goal for this 14-year-old war was to destroy the last Arab army in the region, which could pose a security threat against Israel, and the last Arab army which can produce its own weaponry, and the last Arab army which could export its weapons to the Palestinian and Lebanese factions to carry out armed struggle against the Israeli occupation forces. So once Assad was gone, Israel, a few hours later, they have conducted over 300 strikes against all Syria's strategic weapons, defense, air defenses, navy, and now they are digging into the ballistic missiles and trying to destroy everything. So Syria has been castrated now, basically. And I don't think that there is any serious country in the Middle East, especially, without an army. If you don't have an army, you become like controlled by the regional countries, and Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Qatar, they're going to have the upper hand over Syria. So Syria, that's why I say, is gone. The Syria that we knew in the past is gone, and this is a new Syria in formation. It's going to be definitely less secular, more conservative, and I want for your Western audiences also to understand these definitions are not the same like they know in the US. Secular in Syria meant like all religions and all people in different faith, they have the freedom to practice their faith, and no one can persecute them based on their religion. It's not like an atheist system, or complete removal of religion from society. No, that's not the case. So it's going to be a more Islamic country, less secular, and it's going to lose its sovereignty. So it will become like the Palestinian Authority in West Bank theoretically controlling over the West Bank with the police department, basically, but all the funding and what they have to do and what they don't have to do is coming all from outside.
Well, they allow so with the different factions that are there now. Do you see conflict coming from within in order to power, or do the neocons have such a grip on this that they might let them fight, but in the end, they're still the quote unquote say the hawk in this circle of life?
I think Syria is in front of two scenarios. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope really I'm wrong, because that would be amazing for the Syrian people, for a transitional period to be successful and that they would thrive and they would see finally peace and stability. I truly hope so. Like, this is my genuine hope. But I'm not naive. Like, there are over 30 different militant factions in Syria, and all of them now on the side of the this Jolani's side, right? But they have been fighting forever. Like, they've been fighting against each other in Idlib and in other places before they conquered entire Syria. So I'm not expecting anytime soon for them to get matured and all of a sudden behave civilized. So we are in front of two scenarios. It's either Jolani and his group going to have rule the country with iron fist, and we're going to see a theocratical, let's say, theocracy in the country, and this was going to upset many of the minorities in the country, because Syria has around 20 different minorities, and they will start leaving the country. So you will see more refugee influx from Syria, but this time by the minorities to probably Europe. And since yesterday, I received many calls from Syria asking me if it's possible to come and apply for a refugee in Germany. And those are all people who are from either Christians or Alawites, or they were like supporting the government and they want to leave. So the second scenario is that they would be infighting among these groups, and with the spillover of the infighting everywhere in the country, the certain governorates and certain regions which are populated by the minorities. For example, in Asweda governorate, it's mostly populated by the Druze, and they despise these Islamists, and they would say, we don't want these Islamists, so let's have our own enclave here, and we create our own country. And the Kurds are going probably to do the same, and then probably the Alawites, probably the Christians. So everybody will want to have its peace, But Syria, as Syria as a country, as a civilization, it absorbed all of these identities under this national identity. But once this national identity is dissolved now, with the Islamists coming to power, and they would prefer an Islamic identity, this will isolate the other communities, let's say, who do not believe in Islamism, and they will feel like wanting to have their own federal system, or just separate from Syria. And I think if that happens, and these Islamists will try to subjugate these minorities with force, then that would be a perfect opportunity for the US, Israel, and the rest to present themselves as saviors and come to Syria and install their bases again, because this is how they do. This is how they installed the bases in eastern shore of the Euphrates in Syria, when they said, we're here to fight against ISIS. ISIS is a terrorist organization, and they are threatening the minorities and the Kurds, and we're going to there to, end this. But that was just a smokescreen, because they were there basically to occupy the oil fields of Syria and cut the trade routes between Syria and the neighboring countries, to impoverish the Syrian people, to demoralize them, which led to this outcome. At the end, Syrians didn't resist this HTS invasion because they were so impoverished and so poor and so demoralized to fight. I think Syria is not on the right track. It wasn't on the right track under Assad as well, but that doesn't mean that when he left, Syria is on the right track. I truly think that Syria is, when it loses its sovereignty, it's going to be a pawn in the hands of these different countries. But these different countries have different interests in Syria. Like Saudi Arabia and Qatar both have opposite interests in Syria, and they both support different parties. The US supports a different party, the Israelis support a different party, everybody, Turkey supports a different party. So they're going to have lots of conflict. It could start political, but because all these groups have arms, I don't expect anything from them but to create more instability in the country.
Who provided the primary financing for this to occur? And do you think that some of the top generals in Assad's army were bought off to make it very easy for HTS to march through?
I think everything is possible at this moment. I mean, I've been hearing so much contradictory reports. Some of the
It's so
generals
hard,
said,
Kevork, not to interrupt you. It's so hard with everything with all the information out there, what's real, what's not, and
I mean, I'm able to verify a few information from Syria, and I will mention here now to you. But buying and selling let's say, buying generals in Syria, I think it's possible because between 2011 and 2017, the Syrian economy, despite the war and devastation, it was still okay, right? But after 2017, when Trump ended the regime change war and imposed sanctions instead, the sanctions devastated the economy and the inflation has skyrocketed in a crazy way. Like if you used to buy this pen for $1, let's say, or 1 Syrian lira, it has become like 1,000 times more, and the salaries are the same due to the sanctions, right? So buying a general I think it's a possibility under such circumstances. But who used to pay to these militants? Now, of course, between 2011 and 2017, there was a secret CIA program called Timber Sycamore, and they have funneled $1 billion per year for these covert operations in Syria. So they don't want to say we're in a war against Syria, but they're funneling all these weapons and ammunition and money to these terrorist groups, basically, but secretly, through NATO countries, Turkey and Jordan. Now, during this time, the Pentagon also had its own program in parallel and arming these groups. And at one point, a group funded by the CIA was fighting a group funded by the Pentagon in Syria. And both are anti-Assad groups, but they were fighting against each other. And there is an article about this. So during this time, I think the US was funneling, but the most money was coming from Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Those were the richest countries in the Arabic world who had an interest in toppling Assad. Saudi Arabia stopped the funding in 2018 when MBS came to power and said we no longer want to fund these groups. And eventually, the major group or the main group that they used to support and fund was called Islam's Army, or in Arabic, Jaish al-Islam, has crumbled in a matter of few weeks because the funding stopped in 2018. So this Jaish al-Islam or Islam's army moved from Damascus to the north, near the borders with Turkey, and now Turkey has taken over all these different shades and forms of the jihadi groups in Idlib, and they started equipping them, giving them NATO training, equipment, the weapons, and salaries. So you have a contract army, basically, with tens of thousands of them, armed and trained by a NATO country, funded by Qatar, who secures the salaries and the equipment of these groups. And let's remember, Qatar is labeled as a major non-NATO ally in the region. So they did this operation in Idlib, and they have created a contract army of terrorists, including multinational jihadists. Like we have the Islamic Turkestan Army, has people from the Uyghurs, for example, Xinjiang. We have Uzbekis, Tajikis, Saudis, Chechens, different Turks. So they are multinational. And according to the former MI6 officer, Alistair Crook, he says, like, I think he said he mentioned $1,000 per month, a salary of every HTS terrorist. And compared to the Syrian army, a Syrian army officer receives $50 per month So if you ask me if Qatar was able to buy some officers in the Syrian army or Turkey, I would say that's possible. If you're getting $50 per month and an HTS militant is getting like $1,000 per month, I think that the difference is very high. And HTS is like, as I mentioned, it's this fighter in HTS. It's like their life is like waking up, training, eating, training, sleeping. It's like it's your job to train and fight. The Syrian army is a military service. Like every son in Syria goes to the military. And if you're serving for 7 years, 8 years, 10 years in the military for $50 per month, I don't think that you could continue fighting after 10 years. You would be demoralized. And if I'm not making any excuses, I'm just explaining. So it's possible, completely possible, that some of the generals may have been bought by foreign intelligence.
You know, I had S.L. Canthan on earlier, and he was pointing out the fact that people don't realize in these, like the HTS, for example, that there are Uyghurs from China that they've recruited, and one of his concerns was, now that this army that the deep state of the blob have control of, well, they set them loose potentially on China or India, where he's from, and I responded with, even here in the United States. If people aren't complying, you could set so much fear setting them loose in America.
I think the U.S. Planners, they see this type of terrorism as around the world. If you have a status quo and you want to break this status quo, this terrorist could break the status quo and you can reform new realities. For them, they can serve strategic objectives. Then when terrorist attacks happen in Europe or in the US, compared to the number of people who got killed by terrorist attacks in other regions of the world, it's uncomparable. Like tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people got killed by terrorist attacks around the world. But in Europe and the United States, this is very minimal. And so they see it as like a blowback, as something that is like collateral damage for the sake of a bigger strategy. And if it happens in the US or in Europe, this also serves them in tightening the security measures and in tightening the surveillance and in tightening the laws. If one idiot person like 20, 30 years ago had some small explosives in his shoes, now everybody going to the airport have to take off his shoes. So they have to check, right?
Have you seen those people, Kevork, that are supposed to be keeping you safe at those TSA agencies? I'm sorry to cut you off, but have you seen those people?
No.
Oh my God. I got to take a picture of them next time and put it on X and say, these are the people that are supposed to keep me safe.
Yeah, seriously. Like I go to the airport here, and if I wear like every time I go, they ask me to take off my shoes, and they want to check inside and outside, and it's like, what are they doing? Like, and the all the cameras that you see everywhere, and they have to check your eyes and get your stamps, and it's like they have all the data about everything about you, and also all based on security. So security events in Western countries, it's an opportunity for the planners to tighten up the measures against their own people and the surveillance, basically. And this has accelerated after the Corona era. And I've seen draconian measures here in Germany, which they don't make any sense to me, and I don't know how the people like followed it blindly and no questions were asked. But many people have proven after this experience that I had with them that you can persuade them by fear. Fear is a strong emotion that could lead into desperation and like trusting a government to save you. But my advice is always for people to trust themselves and their instinct and their gut, and also like there are so many factors. You have a brain. God gifted you with a brain. You seriously can use your logic and connect the dots. You don't have to listen to the government to tell you what is right and what is wrong, or on TV telling you to take 4, 5, 6 different, like it's like, why do you listen to them? Like you have a conscious, you have logic. God gifted you. This is what separates you from the animals. But when it's fear, everybody loses the logic. So I think fear is the main factor that, so terrorism is also fear, right? It spreads fear. So it serves them definitely.
Yeah, people like to be told what to do. They can claim that they want freedom all day long, but the majority, in my opinion, because you have to say that every time you share something, but people want to be told what to do.
But this is factually true. Like, I mean, if you're going to wait for researchers to prove it for us, they're not going to do it because there is no funding for such researchers. The researchers are always for things that could generate money, right? And like we saw it with our objective eyes that I watched the podcast for Neil Oliver with Tucker Carlson a few weeks ago, and he mentioned something that I remember during the COVID era. I was so shocked to remember that it happened with many of us that time. Like he was saying, like he used to travel every week between London and Scotland for his show, and every time he gets up the plane and he doesn't wear a mask, everybody used to look at him in a very frustrated way, the only guy not wearing a mask. But the way they used to look back then, like they were just waiting for somebody to give them the order to beat you up. That's how far the people were willing to go. They were waiting for someone to say, this guy is a danger, and you would be beaten up. And this creates, this explains, for example, World War II in Germany, for example, how it was easier, let's say, for people to come under one banner and one leader and do the bidding of this one leader, because it's easy to tell, like the people like to be told what to do. And this is not something unique, by the way, in the Middle East. That's why many of the countries in the Middle East had dictators. But the difference between the Middle East and in other Western liberal countries, that in the Middle East, it's so blatant, dictatorship is so blatant that this one ruler is ruling, and if he's gone, the country is gone. But in the West, you have deep state, you have the permanent state, you have very small elite who control most of the banks, and they control the flow of information, they control everything you see and watch on your TV, and they control the military industrial complex. What else do you need? Like, you have a group of people, they have a big, strong control over the most important aspects of your lives, and they can persuade you to believe certain things. And you would do their bidding thinking you have a free will, but you're not. And once you go against the narrative, if you're small, they don't bother you, so you think you're still free. But once you get bigger and you're influential and you're seriously pushing against the narrative, they will come after you. They will come after you, they will smear you, they will send you to economic jail. You will lose opportunities, you will lose scholarships, you will lose everything, basically. Like, because the facts that I said about Syria for the past 10 years or so, I've been smeared by the press in Germany. I was called like they said I'm a right-wing extremist. They said I'm an Assadist. So now you have articles in the press. If I want to apply for a job or a scholarship or anything, like if you are the HR, you want to check who is this guy, and then the articles in the mainstream press come the results in Google. It's all in their hands, and then they say, oh, this guy is a dangerous conspiracy theorist and this and that. Who would like to hire you? No one. So in the Middle East, these dictatorships are so stupid that they create dungeons, they create prisons, they send people to prisons, and it's so blatant and it creates backlash. But in Western countries, they don't have to send you to dungeon. They can send you to economic jail and you will lose your income. They will close your bank account, they will close your PayPal, they will turn off your Patreon. And then what could you do without money, right? They print the money and then they disallow you to have your decent income to take care of your family. So I think people will really see critically, but most people do not care, in my opinion, because their major interest is their family, and I totally understand that. Like if you're making let's say 3,000 euro per month in Germany and you're taking care of your family and you're just going and coming back to the office and your child is growing and going to the school, I think most people just like, okay, I have a life, I have a son or a daughter, and I have a wife. That's it. They don't have to think beyond that, you know?
Well, and these government, when these government agencies come after you, to your point, in America, especially in the United States, you don't have the financial means to fight it off. So by the time you get through the legal process, even if you emerge as the victor, you're broke. You can't go after for those funds.
This is what happened to me, basically. So what happened basically, because this press started smearing me, and they have claimed things about me that I said, and these were like 180 degree the opposite of what I said. I will just give you one example. 2016, I said Erdogan is using the refugees as a weapon against Europe. And what I meant is he weaponized the refugees against Europe. And this is the same position of the EU, of the intelligence agencies in Germany. They say Erdogan is blackmailing them with the refugees, that I open my borders if you don't give me 8.8 billion. But back then, my mother tongue is not English. My mother tongue is Arabic and Armenian. So I should have used the term weaponized, right? He's weaponizing. So I said he's using as weapons against Europe. But this is the context that I was speaking about. And the German press, they said that Kevork Almassian, he calls the refugees weapons in Europe. And the second day they translate this to Arabic, and Arabic newspapers write, Kevork Almassian says that the refugees are ticking bombs in Europe. So everybody starts translating it the way they want and completely misinterpret what I said and completely taking out of context. And then you have now hundreds of thousands of refugees in Germany, which those are from my community, thinking like I am hating against them. But they create a perception, and until I hire a lawyer and go against this and delete these articles and take down the video reportage about me, the video reportage was watched by 1.4 million people translated to Arabic, and they say I'm saying these things. So 1.4 million people think like I'm a right-wing radical person hating against the refugees, where I didn't say that. Until I deleted this reportage, it took me 1.5 years. The damage was already done. And then I spent thousands of euros, thousands and thousands and thousands of euros from my pocket, which I didn't have. And it sent me into financial crisis, basically. And I lended money from people, started paying them monthly. But at the end of the day, what was the result? They deleted it, but the damage was already done. And you have hundreds of thousands of people already formed an opinion about you, and they're not ready to change it because they don't see that these reportages have been deleted now. So it's a lose-lose game. If you want to really play against them, they're so powerful and they are so hurtful and they're so capable. And individuals like us, we're so vulnerable against them.
And they have the ability of a blank check. The funds, the taxpayer money never stops, and they just keep coming and coming and taking you out to deeper and deeper waters.
Yeah. You know what's ridiculous about this? That in Germany, I don't know how it's the case in the United States. In Germany, we have to pay every 3 months, like the salaries of these journalists. Like every journalist and every TV outlet and the public TV outlet that we watched on TV here, which this same public TV is smearing me, I'm paying for their salaries because I'm the one. Every 3 months we have to make a transfer for these TV channels, and if you don't do that, you could end up to jail. So we're forced to pay for the German public mainstream media and for the salaries of the journalists, and they're the ones coming after us.
I've never heard that before.
So imagine that. Like we're literally financing a propaganda apparatus from our taxpayer money, plus like every 3 months you have to make a transfer Otherwise, they come after you. And if you don't pay, they could send you to jail.
Will you stay in Germany?
I'm now in Germany.
No, will you stay there though?
I don't want to stay in Germany, to be honest with you. And I have other plans. And let's see. Near future, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
What is the likelihood that you'll ever return back to your home in Syria?
At the current moment is 0%. If I go to Syria at the current moment under HTS, I would get killed the moment I step into the country. Because, you know, this HTS and this type of terroristic groups, for 10 years, I've been writing against them and exposing their terroristic nature and talking to Western audiences and explaining them what's happening. And one of these terrorist groups called the Islam Army, they have made a statement in 2019 or 2020, and they even mentioned my name in their statement, saying that there is a government, Assad government thug. They call me, like, they say I'm a spy in Germany. So their eyes are open and they know about me. And if I go to Syria and they capture me, I'm done. You would watch the execution video probably on some social media platform. So no way.
What about anybody that you are associated with or family members there?
That's why I evacuated my family, because my family name is very, I would say, like, I become, unfortunately, my name has become famous in the Syrian society because the work I do, and because the press, for example, at Al Jazeera, they have made a segment about me. And like, Al Jazeera is watched by hundreds of millions of people in the Arabic world. So imagine, like, they make a 5-minute segment about you and they're just telling you how horrible person you are and how evil person you are. So yeah, people would believe that. And that's why I evacuated my family the same night that Assad fled the country, because I was worried that if on a checkpoint they check your ID and if they see, like, my family name, probably they would ask him, like, who, like, are you the father of Kevork? Because in the ID it's also written his father's name, and his father's name, like, he's my grandfather. It's the same my name. It's like so I was worried about them. I have all the right to evacuate them to safety.
Can you even contact anybody there now, or is there a risk of that?
No, I do every day, actually. I talk to my friends, I talk to beloved ones, I talk to some relatives in Syria, and people have to accept the new reality. And if you don't accept it and swallow it, then you will feel like in a big prison. So many people just want to continue their business, open their shops, and go to school. And I think, you know, there is an Arabic saying. It says, when the idea comes when drunkenness fades away. So people are still, like, in this drunk, let's say, phase of, some people are celebrating and some people are unhappy at all about this transition. But when the reality hits, and when people see that Syria as they know it is gone and it will have major changes in the country for better or for worse, some people will like it and some people will not. And I think that most of the, I would say, Christian community and the Alawite community and the Druze community and the Kurdish, they will not like living under an Islamic rule. And this will create resentment. Some people will try to migrate. Some people will go as refugees. So I don't see that there is a bright light at the end of this tunnel. That's why I asked my parents to leave. Not only for security reasons, but rather I think that this phase is going to be very dangerous. And I think my parents deserve peace of mind and stability outside, so I evacuated them. But I speak to my contacts and colleagues every day, and, like, some people are completely upset, but they just pretend like nothing has happened, because even under HTS, are you able to protest against HTS or say something against HTS? It's like they 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 execute people who criticize Jolani in Idlib. So people were also afraid now. So they replaced, I would say, a political, I would say, a secular authoritarian system with religious authoritarian system, which is worse.
What have you gotten any indication on those bases in Russia's military bases? If Russia will stay there, or will they continue to will they be able to operate there in this new regime?
I think that the Russians have struck a deal with the Turkish side, and Turkey has the upper hand over these groups. I think that they will tolerate the Russian Navy as long as there is no strong Russian military presence in the streets and people can't see them. In my opinion, this is how Syria is going to look like. In the north, we have the second largest city, Aleppo. We have Idlib, where all these terrorists were stationed, basically, and we have the central city of Homs. I think these three governorates are going to be under Turkish influence. And then we have in the west, Latakia and Tartus on the coast. I think Russia is going to have the upper hand there because they have a navy and they want to preserve their navy. And then we have Damascus and Daraa in the south. This is going to be more Saudi, Emirati, Jordanian influence. And the Kurds are going to be under American protection. This is how I see it's going to happen. And one last, it's the governorate of Sueda, mostly Druze. Israel is already sending the signals saying like, if you feel unsafe, if you see that these Islamists are going to attack you or slaughter you, we can protect you. And because Israel already occupies the Syrian Golan Heights since 1967, and the Golan Heights has been populated by the Druze, I think Israel also has the interest of opening up channels to the Druze community, the rest of the Druze community in Syria, and presenting itself as, protector, as a savior. So they could also include the Sueda to the Golan Heights in a later stage.
Then I know we're running out of time here with you, but so Jolani doesn't factor into this in the long run because you said at some point he'll irritate the neocons, so just dispose of him.
He will get killed soon. Somebody will kill him, and if it's not a drone attack, it's going to be somebody is killing him. It's not good PR to have. You can rebrand him now until he takes over the country because you need the leader of the army which conquered the entire the country, right? Like if you kill him now, HDS could start fighting itself, and who is going to replace him? But you need first to have a strong grip on the country and present a new constitution and new so-called elections, etc., etc., etc. After that, you get rid of him when he's no longer useful for you. But now he's still useful for the U.S. strategy in the country.
What happens then when he's gone? Then the next person up will take over that HTS or whatever it evolves into?
I think what is going to happen is they will redraft a new constitution, and they will include all these gangs into like state apparatuses. And once they are inside state apparatuses, you have a Ministry of Defense or Chief of Staff, and the government basically theoretically controls them. After that, you get rid of Jolani. You no longer need him because Jolani will not be in the government in any way or shape. He's on the U.S. terrorist list. I don't think the people are dumb enough to bring him into the cabinet in Syria, but they will need him to keep this multinational contract army of terrorists basically intact at the current moment until a constitution is formed, ministries, including all these militants, the Syrian militants basically, into the Syrian armed forces, and having state apparatus who can control and guide them, and then you get rid of Jolani. Or he leaves the country anyways. Probably later he leaves to Afghanistan or Pakistan or Iraq, or he just disappears, We have so many cases like this, like notorious Qaeda terrorists disappearing in Yemen. So I think he has lots of places to disappear if he wants to.
Then they can start with the natural gas pipeline, right? Isn't that what plays into all this? Kevork, I'm sorry. But yeah, I know you got to go, but
No, I think that gas is a very important factor in this. But now, because Israel has found a big sum of gas in the Mediterranean, in front of Gaza, in front of Lebanon, and also in front of the Syrian shores, I think that British and Israeli and American companies are going to extract this gas. And they will not give it now to Qatar. They will do it themselves and they will send it to Europe from the Mediterranean. I think they have lots of tens of billions worth of gas beneath the Mediterranean. And this has been discussed for a long time between these different parties, and they try to take over some of these gas fields, like even in your national, let's say, regional waters, like in Lebanon. But now they have an upper hand over Gaza, over Lebanon, over Syria. So nothing could stop them from extracting this gas and sending it to Europe.
and they'll
And
just.
it,
Oh, sorry.
the Qatari gas pipeline was, I think, this was offered to Assad 2008, and he rejected it. And this was one of the main reasons why they wanted him out. But now they found an alternative, in the shores, and more profitable for them than sending a Qatari gas to Europe.
This is what Matt Bracken and I were talking about yesterday because, he was referencing now the people around that gas pipeline that live in those communities that control those areas. Because my thought was, okay, would they attack, try to thwart, slow down this building? But they'll pay so much money to these people that they'll take it.
I think the investment in Syria was with tens of billions of dollars. Estimates are around $200 billion. And they have caused damage for $300 billion in Syrian infrastructure and looting the Syrian oil and wheat. So I don't think there is any intelligence apparatus or any government would invest this sum of money in another country to bring a democracy or human rights. I think that there are serious factors behind it, and it's about energy. And even if people always also think that, but the US doesn't need the gas and oil, right? Why would they take over the Syrian oil? It's not about them. It's about preventing your enemies from the energy. That's a different issue. Because it's all about, for the US planners, it's all about zero-sum game. They cannot really accept win-win solutions. And if any regional power is winning and making enough money and politically is unpleasant to you, you will crush them. No hesitation. And this is why they occupy Syrian oil, because the Syrian oil is in the hands of the US Army. They don't need that oil. Why are they occupying it? Because they didn't want for the Syrian government to use the oil to rebuild the country. Because once you rebuild the country, you will gain popularity again, and you will feed your army, and your army will be motivated to fight again. They will not be demoralized, and there are so many other factors. So that's why they do it. It's not about them. The American army basically they don't even use the oil. They just sell it to finance their stay in Syria, and they finance the Kurdish militias there. But the main reason is to stop the government from having an access to the oil. And then Syria needs every month to buy fuel from Iran. Syria is an oil producing country. They don't need fuel from Iran. But now you have to buy it from the market, and you don't have the money to pay. So it becomes a failed state, right? So that's how Syria crumbled so fast, because it has become rotten to the core, poor, impoverished, demoralized, under draconian sanctions, devastated. So people didn't have the will to fight this time.
Last question. What do you say to people? I've said many a times here in the United States that people have taken this country for granted. They don't realize, there's other parts of the world where things are going on like what you've experienced in your home country. I use the term, well, it's not mine, but somebody else referenced it, blissfully unaware. That's how people are here. They care about their lattes, they care about yoga, and their Netflix series, and fantasy, NFL football, whatever else. What do you, I want to get a coffee mug that says blissfully unaware. Am I right? Is that an accurate statement?
No, that's so true because my wife tells me this all the time. She's a German, and sometimes, she's bothered by some minor problems, and or in her mind it's a big problem, and or any other friend here in Germany when they complain about their problems, and I'm like, I hope half of my problems are like your problem, you know. The cafe, you asked it with oat milk and it came with, some real milk or something, you know. It's like I've been living on a survival mode for 14 years and you're complaining about about the cafe, you know. It's like, it sounds so ridiculous to me. But I don't, of course, tell them this. But my wife is very smart and is very awake, and she's very considerate, and she feels a lot about what I'm going through. And sometimes she say, like, how can I complain to you about my problems? I feel like they're so absurd and ridiculous compared to what you have to take care about, like evacuating your parents under bombing and bullets outside the country, and walking them basically many kilometers under cold weathers into certain buffer zone where there is no arms and people fighting each other. It's like this type of things, like it was on my mind, and I've been doing it for 14 years. So, but I would also say something. I also realized it this time, and after this recent conflict, which erupted again in Syria, all these problems that you pass through, they traumatize you. But you really have to seriously think about it in two ways. You either can really get seriously traumatized and you lose your temper, you lose your resilience, you lose like your mental health becomes like you crumble basically, right? And I passed through that phase, but then I had also the thanks to many people that I also watch on podcasts, and I'm not saying these motivational things, but they're concrete things that I learned from podcasts about physical strength, for example, how it could impact my mental health. And I committed myself to go to the gym almost every day. And I do heavy weightlifting, I do some boxing, and it creates a very strong mind at the end. And now that I'm passing through even worse crisis than it was in the past, I didn't feel like I'm going to collapse mentally or I'm going to, suffer some panic attack, this and that. No, I was strong enough to understand it, to swallow it, and just find solutions to the problem. So yeah, this type of problems also create stronger personalities. So I'm not saying people have to go through these things, but if you see the smaller, brighter side of it, it just creates a tough personality at the end of the day. And I think many men lacking nowadays some toughness in their lives, that also creates other problems in society. So some people seriously have to put themselves in a little bit of hardships to create stronger personalities, because now I live in the West and I see many men in German society. It's like I don't know if it's because of the indoctrination or historical factors. I don't know what is it. Maybe it's combination, but you feel like woman is getting more masculine and men are getting more feminine, and everything is becoming imbalanced in the society. So I become more like a traditional person. Maybe I'm growing up or becoming old. I don't know what's happening to me.
Do you do like a carnivore diet or anything? Do you follow a specific eating regime with all this?
I just eat simple food. I no longer eat processed food. I don't consume sugar. I eat just eggs, a lot of eggs, basically. Unlike what the doctors say, I eat lots of eggs. I eat red meat, chicken, tuna, sardine, veggies, and some potatoes. That's it. You don't need to complicate things, because in our cuisine in Syria, if my mother goes to the kitchen, she needs like 6 hours like to cook one meal, and then we eat it in 5 minutes. No, I can just have 5 eggs with some yogurt and some berries, and that's a breakfast. You're done. You don't have to cook things, just simple food.
What about, do you do an intermittent fast or anything, or do you work within a certain hour window every day, or you just eat when you're hungry?
I did intermittent fasting for 6 months. Last food I ate probably at 9 at night because my training is late. And then the second day I eat like 12 or 1 noontime. But because I already lost enough weight, and I lost like 14 kilograms because of the training, then I wanted to build more muscles. Then I restored the previous like 3 meals per day, and I'm very okay. I already feel like muscles getting bigger, but I also take supplements. Creatine is like I recommend for younger, older. Even I give it to my father and to my mother, creatine every day, 5 grams. It's just amazing for the muscles, for the mental health, and that's it. I don't need anything else.
Kevork, where can people find you?
I'm doing almost daily live streamings now on my YouTube and Rumble, posting both at the same time, Syriana analysis. So people can find this podcast there.
And then on X?
On X, my personal name, Kevork Almassian.
Kevork, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it, and love to have you back on. And looking forward to continue to follow in your work and more conversations ahead.
I would love to have you on my show soon. So we will keep in touch, and we will see what's going to happen next in our world and coordinate.
Love to be on. Let me know whenever I'm available.
Thank you so much, really. I appreciate it.
Mic drop.